Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 20 of the Roses and Rhetoric podcast. I am your host, Joseph Stanford. With me, my humble and scrappy co host, Jimmy Hackett. Jimmy, we got a very special episode today. Why don't we tell the people what it's going to be about?
This is going to be a great episode. So, for those of you who've been following the show now, I do live in Houston, Texas. Everybody, of course, knows we've had a bit of a cold spell these past couple of days. Um, we actually just got power back in our apartment a couple of days ago. It's been touch and go. It's been slow and go on the I-45, so to speak. And I understand that my charming co-host from Portland, Oregon, also had a bit of weather this past week as well.
Yep, and I decided to go the route of Ted Cruz and head south from Portland, Oregon, down to southern Arizona for this episode. So here I am in Tucson today.
And it looks like you're joining us from some kind of rehabilitation center or something. Tell us a little bit about where you're located. You have a nice fountain behind you and a nice bench. This is very scenic.
Yeah, it's a Zen garden for the mentally insane, actually, and I like to come here to regain my sanity from time to time.
Well, that is of course, our target audience for the Rose and Rhetoric podcast. Uh, this was an interesting week because on Sunday or maybe Monday, all every days run together when you're out of electricity and you can't tell what time it is. But at some point, we lost power and we lost water. And my wife and myself found ourselves out in the front yard with buckets collecting snow melt in order to use to flush our toilets. And then the next day we had to go to work because we got power back. And it was a nice reflection on kind of how boring life feels when the day before you're gathering snow to flush your toilets, that everything kind of fails in comparison to living on the edge, like you're doing when you're living through a snow apocalypse. Did you have a similar experience returning back to mundane normalcy when you've escaped the winter storm of Portland?
I didn't have any toilet malfunctions, no, but I am curious. Did you have to melt the snow first before you put it in the toilet bowl, or how did you do that?
Yeah, luckily we did not. We found a gutter out kind of at the front of the complex that we put a bucket underneath. So we were collecting water that way. And we were fortuitous enough to have a couple of buckets that could hold a sizable amount of water. And we also had a fairly large plastic bin that we were able to fill up with water as well. So we kind of, at one point, it was like a slow trickling through our kitchen faucet that we were just using to slowly fill up this giant bucket in case we really lost all the water again. So it was a nice amount of problem solving, good amount of living kind of by the sweat of your brow, so to speak. And I was lucky enough to go to the grocery store probably about a day before the real winter catastrophe hit Houston. And in front of me, there was these two college couples that were checking out at the store together, and they had in their grocery cart all the essentials, which for these four people included 2 bottles of red wine, a bottle of tropical pre-mixed alcoholic beverages, a box of chocolate chip cookies, and a very small container of toilet paper. So they were planning on just writing it out the old-fashioned way. The winter storm. I was very impressed by their scrappiness. It was very impressive.
Well, we're glad to hear that you guys are coming out of it all right, and that we're able to have Wi-Fi for today's episode, so we can keep the unbroken streak going.
It was fun. I played a game, seeing how many pages I could read in a book without stopping, because that was all I could do was read by like the natural light of kind of like this foggy winter haze that's been over Houston for the past few days. And I think I could read without stop 30 pages. That was like my limit. I could read 30 pages at once. I thought that was pretty good. I thought 30 pages is respectable for myself.
Yeah, 30 pages before you got to take a social media break or something.
Yeah, social media, or in my case, just like sleeping because I didn't want to waste my phone battery and I couldn't log onto my computer. So yeah, it was good. I'm happy to be back, and I am for anybody else still without power, without water. Thoughts are with you guys. Hopefully, we all get through this and enjoy a bright, warm spring or something to that effect. But this is not going to be an episode just complaining about the weather. We actually have a new segment we're bringing into the R&R podcast environment that we are creating here. And we have a good friend of the podcast, a music correspondent of sorts, who will be providing us with a weekly album recommendation. And we have such a recommendation for this week's podcast. So, Joe, when you're ready, tell us a little bit about this album's recommendation.
Yes. So the official Roses and Rhetoric music correspondent has submitted the official Roses and Rhetoric album of this week. And this week, the album it's from 1994, and it's called Southern Playistic Cadillac Music, and the artist is Outkast. And this is a great album. It's one of Outkast's first albums, and it was actually written when they were 18. And Jim, I'm not sure if you got a chance to listen to this yet, but I've heard it quite a few times over the past week. And I just want to read one of the interludes from the episode because I think it sums it up well. It gives a good synopsis of what it's about. And here it goes. So, operating under the crooked American system too long, outcast, pronounced outcast, adjective, meaning homeless or unaccepted in society. But let's look deeper than that. Are you an outcast? If you understand and feel the basic principles and fundamental truths contained within this music, you probably are. If you think it's all about pimping hoes and slamming Cadillac does, you probably a cracker or a neighbor that think he a cracker. Or maybe just don't understand. An outcast is someone who is not considered to be part of the normal world. He is looked at differently. He is not accepted because of his clothes, his hair, his occupations, his beliefs, or his skin color. Now look at yourself. Are you an outcast? I know I am. As a matter of fact, fuck being anything else. It's only so much time left in this crazy world. Wake up, neighbors, and realize what's going on around you. Poisoning of the food and water, tampering of cigarettes, disease engineering control over your life. Take back your existence or die like a punk. This is Big Rube saying right to the real and death to the fakers. Peace out. So I want to get your take on that, but I just want to say that that's kind of what the album is about. Is it's about not necessarily the typical gang banging type lyrics that you find in most podcasts, although there is a little bit of slamming Cadillac does and pimping hoes. Don't get me wrong, but the bigger theme is treating these people, these outcasts as they call them, and kind of making it seem okay to be different and making it seem okay to be yourself in this world, etc. Was there anything in that resonated with you?
It reminds me of a motif that comes up in dystopian novels, 1984, Brave New World, etc., where what defines the essential character, and also, of course, the great Fahrenheit 451, but what kind of encapsulates the persona of the main character is that at some point they begin to realize that the world they're in is completely absurd, and that makes them an outcast to society. In other words, they're living in a world that makes sense to them for the longest time, and then there's some triggering moment where all of a sudden the absurdity of the world they're living in is completely illuminated and nothing makes sense anymore. The idea of a fireman being somebody who burns books is ridiculous. The idea of living in 1984 where, one day you're at war with this country, but then the next day, oh no, we were never at war with that country. It was always at war with the other country, and that country is our ally. It is so on and so forth. The realization of absurd aspects of society and of a contemporary world is not just the mark of an outcast, but actually is the mark of a genius. And it's long been my view. I think we and I have talked about this before in the past. I think your view as well, that artists are especially tuned in some ways to identifying absurdity. And I think in the lyrics of Outkast, I mean, as a group, they have a number of great songs, but picking up on these absurdities and realizing, what we're being told is normal is in fact normal, and that it's common, but isn't correct. And there's a huge difference between something being normal and something being right. And I think the lyrics in that interlude that you just gave summarized that characteristic. I mean, all of us at all times should be on the lookout for things that flat out do not make sense. And we talk all the time on this podcast about how as social creatures, we are wired in some ways to work against that action because of things like social proof, where we look to people around us to define norms. and to also define behaviors. Again, I mean, really, it's all about action. What are we doing that matters? And when we use social proof as a guidance for our actions, usually we will be okay. But it can blind us to absurdities when it is not okay. And it doesn't take a genius or a historian to go through the history books and to find all these examples of behavior of the past that was both common and would have been enforced by the mechanism of social proof that we now look back on and go, how absurd was that was ever possible? And the list goes on and on. They're all cliche examples, but when I hear lyrics like that from Outkast or when I read dystopian novels, it reminds me of trying to develop within ourselves that character trait of being on the lookout for absurdities and to realize that something being common does not make it correct. I think that is a hard thing to do, but it is important nonetheless.
Yeah, absurdities are very hard to recognize, especially when you're in the system. It's humans are designed to kind of just go with things, like not really think for themselves. Like humans as a whole typically aren't an individualistic creature. We largely get a lot of our ideas and a lot of our thoughts and politics. We just download it from the mainstream in different ways. So I think there is something there to say that there are these artists in the world that live outside the system in a way, and that can kind of get a third party perspective on things, and they can call out and really recognize a lot of the absurdities that we're living in. And I think that this album, Southern Playistic Cadillac Music by Outkast, is a great reminder for that. And it's only an hour, 17 songs, and it's got a lot of great hits on it. I mean, it's got Ain't No Thing, Players Ball, Crumbling Herb, Get Up, Get Out. I know these songs might not mean something to someone that doesn't know a lot about Outkast, but if you know, you know. And this album gets a 10 out of 10 for my score.
When you're listening to an album, how important is it for you that the album itself tells a cohesive story? Do you listen to albums as a kind of spoken word poetry, or do you more enjoy albums where every song is possibly, kind of its own standalone artistic achievement? Do you like when an album is designed to be one cohesive story from beginning to end?
I do like that. Um, I do like the storyline. Typically, when I listen to music, I don't know what it's called. There's got to be a term for this, but just how my brain works, like it doesn't process like words very well. So like if I'm watching a movie or something, like it's kind of difficult for me to pick up all the words that are being said without subtitles, or like remembering movie quotes is something that I'm horrible at. Like there's some people just remember every single word from every single line of Dumb and Dumber or something, like just watching it through once.
Right.
But I'm the exact opposite way of that. And throughout time, I've just lyrics have been something difficult for me to process in music, and like a lot of what I get from music is more the attitude and the wavelength and the moods that it sets. And
Hmm.
that was my biggest driver. But I was listening to this album on the plane the other day and really taking a conscious effort to just like listen to every lyric and piece it all together and like follow the narrative as it goes through the album. And I mean, I was blown away by it. Like I felt like I finally learned how to listen to music. um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that narrative is what makes good albums and turns them into great albums.
I was thinking as you were talking, I was thinking, with I would imagine the majority of music today is consumed by apps like Spotify or YouTube or Pandora, where the song being played is through some kind of shuffle. And so because it's playing in a shuffle, that you're losing the cohesive narrative of the album because it'll be one song from this album, another song from another album, then it'll be an ad about erectile dysfunction, and then it'll be another song from another album, and then another ad about erectile. Yeah, I mean, there's no in because every song is separate, and because we all have, we probably all have ED or something. We're 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 just losing the album as a whole unit. That is, it's more about making a good song today. I would imagine. I don't know this to be true, but it seems to me that there would be more focus on the musician making a good song rather than making a good album. And I can imagine that creatively, that's a very different process. It'd be like the difference between writing a short story versus Lord of the Rings. I mean, both are important, but it's a different act of creation to tell one story for a long time versus a punchy, memorable quote or something along those lines.
Mm. Yeah, like record stores, right? Like you used to have to that used to be how you released your music was through a record, through an album.
Mm-hmm.
But those no longer exist. And like you said with Spotify, it's just streaming. So like a lot of times artists will just drop an album that just has one or two good songs and the rest are just really just filler just to say
Yeah.
they put out an album. And I see that continue across like movies too. Like movies used to be a big deal, and then you started having Netflix and Amazon Prime and all these TV show streaming services that
Yeah.
reduced that, and then that was further amplified when COVID came around because then you can't go to the movies. So like
Right.
all these big blockbuster films are, you can't get funding for them because
Yeah.
you can't debut them. Like remember Top Gun was supposed to come out. Whatever happened to that? That was supposed to come
Top
out like
Gun,
last summer.
Top Gun 2, baby. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Top Gun 2, bet with Tom Cruise, best in the business. What
That's in the
happened to that?
business. Yeah, it's crazy. I remember listening. Let me do two things on that. The first is your point about, and really this is a point that I've heard from people like Christopher Nolan make, is that there's a tremendous difference, or that there should be a tremendous difference between watching a movie in a theater with a giant screen and you're around other people and the surround sound is rattling your brain versus watching a movie on like your fucking phone or something. I mean, can you imagine if you watched John Wick on your phone? What would that be? It'd be nothing. Like, these cinemas are designed literally to be an immersive experience, and we are absolutely losing that right now with movies. And I think in some ways maybe that drives for people that are making movies to try to get more out of narrative and out of storytelling devices that don't rely on the effects. But I don't want people to feel that those effects should be discounted. I mean, the point of making a movie is that as an artist, you should be maximizing every aspect of your medium. If you're making a movie for a theater, you should be using to the fullest extent possible every aspect of that movie theater so that it could not be told as well on a cell phone or it could not be told as well in a book. If you're making a movie, it should be because the movie is the best way to tell the story you're trying to tell, plain and simple. And we're losing that by having theaters being shut down. That's point number one. Point number two is a point made by a conservative social critic who passed away recently, named Roger Scruton, I think is his name, maybe Scruton. I actually don't know his last name,
I
but
thought you were gonna drop the Rush Limbaugh bomb there.
no, no. Roger Scruton is, I think, a little more high class than Rush Limbaugh. But I think he had this essay that he wrote a while back called "The Tyranny of Pop Music," which is that basically the way that we experience music today is it's background music for things. That everywhere you go, there's music in the background. When you're driving, when you're in the mall, when you're walking. Like I've been in a Phoenix Fashion Square where when you're walking around outside, there's music. No one's fucking quiet anymore. Everywhere's this fucking noise. It's ridiculous. And these songs are just these kind of monotonous drones in the background. And you're thinking, is that art? I mean, is that really? It's just filling the background with noise. And so
Elevator music.
elevator music, exactly right. Which is not to say that there are not important, quote unquote pop songs. There are, but the problem is that when you hear music all the time, you are losing the ability to pinpoint the truly creative artistic endeavors, and it all becomes this background smear of bullshit, and you can't tell anything apart anymore. I mean, you're hearing this like, is that Lady Gaga? Is that Kesha? I mean, you can't hear anymore. It's just all in the background. And you're not really given opportunity to really sit and listen to music. I mean, when people used to go to a symphony hall, you weren't doing something else with the music. You were listening to the music. When you were listening to the Outkast album, you were listening to it.
Yeah.
That's what made it. That is what made it an experience. And so, I actually quite enjoy a number of pop songs right now. But the point is that if the music is not good enough, that it is all that you need, then it's not good music. If you're playing that song to drown out the background and you don't care to actually listen and to take in the music in and of itself, then it's not a good song. A good song should draw in your attention and demand your attention. And I fear that we are not giving music that opportunity because we're using it to pass time quickly
Mm.
rather than enjoying it as an artistic experience.
So that's something that I was talking to someone about yesterday. I know that we've had Jack on the podcast, and he talked about. He's probably the first person I knew that actually did this, but I've heard about it on like Twitter and trends and Reddit and whatnot. But the dopamine fast,
Hmm.
which is where it's kind of like Lent, right? That's very appropriate because today is was it Holy Saturday, the day after Good Friday? I don't know what it's called.
It
But
was Ash Wednesday on Wednesday. I don't know what day.
um, but the idea is that you purposely deprive yourself or you purposely fast from things that provide dopamine to you. So like for example, maybe you don't drink coffee every morning, or
Hmm.
you set a window where you just don't have dopamine during that time. You don't listen to music, you don't do coffee, you don't watch TV, you don't do drugs, you don't whatever it is,
Hmm.
you just skip it. And the idea is that that gives, if you routinely do that, it gives your dopamine receptors and your neurotransmitters a chance to recharge and your sensitivity to recharge, and then the effect is that your baseline goes up a little bit.
Hmm.
Now, I've never tried anything like this, and I am skeptical of the results, but it's a thing and it's out there. And we were talking about music. That's what reminded me, because a lot of people just play that music in the background just to. It's almost like a dopamine raise that they get.
Yeah.
It feels like.
Yeah, I think, and we were talking about this last week, that it becomes a device that you can use to make being bored okay. And I think
Yeah.
what we would rather people do is, if you're bored, find something to do. I mean, don't find a way to make being bored fun. Boredom is your body rejecting against whatever it is you're doing. If you're bored doing something, try to do something different. And obviously, you can't always do that. But I hate the idea of somebody wasting a weekend or something, kind of just being bored with music in the background. And again, this is not to say that listening to music is not doing something. It absolutely can be, but you have to make it something. You have to be actively listening to the music. And it's all too easy to not do that, because in a sense, we are desensitized to music by having it on all of the time. We are
Mm.
not encouraged to really pay attention to a song. We are encouraged to have music playing in the background. And I think that that's a disservice, because I'll say it again, I think a lot of artists today are extremely talented, and their songs warrant listening to. But in order to discover that, you have to put in the active listening to have that be accomplished. I mean, I would say that probably of all the cliches we hear now, I would say active listening is probably a cliche worth paying attention to. That there absolutely is a difference between hearing somebody versus listening. And I think that that's a thing that we should probably all of us pay more attention to. And especially when it comes to things like audiobooks, it's are you hearing the audiobook, or are you listening to the audiobook? Are you playing the audiobook while you're doing work at work, or are you listening to it like you would a book that you were reading? And I think those are two very different things. But lo and behold, the little timer going across on your phone doesn't slow up depending on how well you're focusing on it. It doesn't give a damn about whether or not you're hearing what the author is saying. And so
Mm.
it's all too easy just to have things pass us by, especially when it's in the audio realm. That visual does a better job of captivating our attention, but the audio is a little easier to let slip by without giving careful analysis.
Yeah, that's a good distinguishment between active activities versus passive activities, and that's something I've been trying to do in my own life is to do more active activities. Like when you're listening to music, you're listening to the music. You're not just doing 10 other things and have it in the background. Or like when you're watching a movie, like I realized, like, when was the last time I just sat down and just like watched a movie without like flipping through my phone or like going on my computer or like cooking a meal at the same time? Like, when was the
Or
last time
talking
that
to
ever happened?
somebody, or you know what I mean, like making little
Anything.
comments to be like, I do that all the time, right? Like watching a movie, like I make a joke about it or something, but you
Oh, that's fun. That's acceptable.
but no, I totally agree with you. I mean, it's um I it actually almost comes down to respect, in a way that if you're going to take in a piece of art, we should give the artist kind of this idea that we defer to their talent, in a sense, that we basically say we're going to give you the benefit of the doubt that this is worth our attention, and that like, we should grant them that privilege, in a sense, because somebody made this, created this thing, and they thought it was good enough to give to us. We should take them up on that, and give it our attention for that reason alone, almost. And then afterwards, if you don't like it, I'll listen to it again or watch it again. But in that first instance, give it a chance, I would say.
Yeah, gotta respect the artist. I think it just mental well-being too,
Yeah.
because I think that people just get in this habit of being afraid to just like really dive down and like be conscious of the activities they're doing, and that in a way is just it's a habit of escaping reality. And the more you escape reality and what's in front of you, I think the less happy you be. So, yeah.
Do you think that part of a reason somebody would judge a movie is a sense of jealousy? That in a sense they want to avoid being blown away because they don't want it to be better than their creation. There's kind of this idea of like, I'll kind of give this movie 50% of my attention because how good can it really be? But that's an attempt for them to avoid really being blown away by an experience and in a sense feeling inferior to the person's creative creation.
Is that like saying like, oh, I already have a favorite movie, so I'm
Yeah,
just gonna kind of half pay attention to this because I don't want to have to change all my Facebook
right.
posts saying I have a new favorite movie or something like
Exactly.
that?
Changing all my at work icebreakers of a favorite movie. And I've been saying it's Eyes Wide Shut for so many years. I can't say it's something else now.
Do you actually say that in work environments?
Not in work environments. I love Eyes Wide Shut. I feel like there's a small collection of people that really love that movie, and I
It's a
happen
true
to be
story,
one of
right?
them. I've been there before. No, that'd be for another episode. No, I'm kidding. I love Eyes Wide Shut. First off, I love Tom Cruise. I've always said that I love Tom Cruise.
Best in the business.
Best in the business. Best in the business. And I absolutely love Eyes Wide Shut, and I think it's a great movie. And I love Kubrick as well. Another best in the business, another goat, if you will. Him and Tom Brady and Tom Cruise all hang out. Well, I guess Kubrick is dead, but when they were all alive, I guess they would all hang out. But I love Eyes Wide Shut, and I mean, and also I was telling you this on an earlier episode too, but the movie The Master, which I think is like, I think you could say with a straight face is like is a perfect movie. It doesn't mean that it's your favorite movie. It's like if you're watching it, I couldn't change a single thing in it without making it worse. I mean, it was just so well done. It was a true example of expert craftsmanship and the cinema experience.
Yeah. What's the verdict on Kubrick? Did he get knocked or did he die of? What was his cause of death? Like, what's the conspiracy
I don't.
theories on that?
I didn't know that there were any. I'm surprised to hear that. I mean, I knew that he was famously very harsh on actors and actresses that worked on his films. That there was talk about him being, very harsh on the actress in The Shining. And maybe even harsh isn't strong enough a word. I don't remember all the details. So I'm trying to be kind of vague about it, but that I did hear. And then I knew that he was also, I think this is true, that he was very much a perfectionist as well. So I imagine working for people like that could be quite hard, but I never knew any theories about him having a mysterious death or not. I think he has a
Yeah.
kid, doesn't he? Or is that not, does he have a daughter or something?
Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
The story I heard was that, and this is the conspiracy theory I heard. Let me
Oh,
make that
good.
clear. Was that when making Eyes Wide Shut, because that was one of the last movies he made, right?
Could have been. I really don't know.
And the movie is about it's the Freemasons or the Illuminati or some sort of deep state secret society type themed movie.
Deep state.
And yeah, and the conspiracy theory goes that he exposed some things that a lot of people weren't very happy about him exposing, and I think he died within a very short time frame after that. I don't know the cause of death or anything, but there's a lot of speculation that the contents of that movie, someone decided, all right, this guy's got to go. We can't
Interesting.
keep this going.
We will have to get our Roses and Rhetoric correspondence.
Movie correspondent.
Yeah, on the movie correspondence on the case and to see what it was. If anybody listening to this, I watch the movie. I really recommend it. It's a great movie, and in my opinion, I think his best movie. If I didn't pick that one, I would probably pick 2001: A Space Odyssey, which I watched recently and really enjoyed as well. So definitely Kubrick, get out there and watch it. And hopefully he's resting in peace, and hopefully he died of natural causes.
Amen.
I want to talk a little bit about, so I've been reading this book. I haven't finished yet, but I'm nearly done with it. But it's from an author named Rene Girard, who was this like social critic and anthropologist. And the name of the book is called Things Hidden Since the Foundation of the World. And the overarching theme of the book is that almost every aspect of human culture can be explained by our utilizing of a scapegoat mechanism in order to prevent wider spread of violence. And the idea is that violence arises from people copying other people and desiring the same things as other people, which naturally leads to conflict. And the way that we avoid the conflict is that we, in a sense, gang up on an outside group as a way to unify ourselves to avoid wider spread of violence. And so an example of this on like a lower scale would be a situation where a group of friends gossip about another friend, and in that process become more kind of cohesive and unified as a group. And where I want to talk, or what I want to talk about now, is we will talk about that book in the future when I finish it. I want to talk about a little piece of that book now, which is jealousy. And I think jealousy is going to be one of the key things that, as a species, if you will, we need to be careful of, especially in the context of two things. One of which is social media, and the other is with extremely volatile asset prices. When you see things like Bitcoin or GameStop stock or any number of Dogecoin, whatever the hell that is, when you see in short time periods these assets just ballooning in price, you will see a lot of people make a ton of money. And I think there will be this instinct in society to be jealous of those people. And I think jealousy is extremely toxic. I think it's extremely corrosive to social cohesion, and I think does lead to violence. And I want to talk about things we can do to avoid being jealous of other people. And I think it's actually kind of easy. I think it's a matter of just willing yourself to go through the action of celebrating other people's achievements. And I want to pass this over to you for your thoughts on it, but in particular, um, a bit of a conversation on this idea of abundance as a mindset, and how we can frame ourselves to view abundance as a not only a good thing, but also a way to avoid this zero sum, they win because I lose, I win because they lose mentality, which I think leads to jealousy and ultimately is very destructive.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's way more common of a paradigm that people have than they should have, right? Like a lot of people think, oh, this person's doing better, so that means there's not enough out there for me. And jealousy is a tough one for me because I think that it does have some utility if channeled properly. In other words, like that's like what competition is. Like, if Kobe Bryant scores more points in a game than my MJ did, then MJ is going to get a little jealous. He's going to practice a little harder, come back stronger the next week, type thing.
Yep.
But I don't think that's the type of jealousy that most people have. I think that the type of jealousy most people have doesn't lead to harder work and dedication. It just leads to resentment. And I've seen that a lot in my own life. Like I can think of some people in my life that are no longer there, from what I I think to believe, and what I believe to believe is that it's just jealousy. Like I don't know, you can listen to a Drake song. He talks about it all the time. Like, it's lonely at the top. Like as you move up, like people don't want to follow, and they actually start to resent you for your accomplishments rather than congratulate you and get excited and celebrate with you, like you described. And that's a real high form of consciousness, to be able to step back and show appreciation and celebrate in other people's victories, because I'd say the majority of people today do not do that, do not know how to do that, and they're not even aware that they have control over doing that, I would argue.
And let's create a logical framework for why you should celebrate your friends being successful. And let's start from a purely selfish perspective. I am better off having a bunch of friends with a bunch of money, because then if I need money, I'm closer to it. Now, that is true if they're your friends, which is the premise of the argument. So I want my friends to be wealthy for many reasons, but one of them is that that makes my life a little bit easier because now all of a sudden my probability of being, on the street or something is diminished. So
Hmm.
there's even just a purely selfish reason for wanting your friends to be successful, which is the idea that you're building a society in which more people can take care of each other. That is a good thing. But it's also important to build on the idea of learning from other people how they became successful and trying to emulate some of their behavior when appropriate, rather than looking at their success and trying to find ways of cutting it down. And to me is when the jealousy becomes pernicious. Where it's one thing for Michael Jordan, because I think you're totally right, and I think competition in the right amount is good. Where it becomes bad is when you are so focused on the outcome that you're willing to cheat to beat somebody, or you're willing to cut them down to beat somebody, or willing to make excuses in order to beat somebody. All of that is bad. And so the key thing with jealousy, and this is a point that's made by people like Adam Carolla, is the idea of internalization. That when I observe somebody being successful, I'm going to objectively observe what they are doing, copy their good behavior, which does not mean copying all of their behavior, because of course a factor of luck is always in place when people are successful, and that it's good to admit that. But it is also, it would be bad to not learn anything from their behavior and to find excuses for why you're where you are and why they are why they are where they are. And I think it's very common, much to your point, it's very common to do that. And it is hard to applaud your friend's success, but I think we can just make ourselves do it. I mean, I know that that's naive, but really we can just literally just say out loud, I am happy for success. I believe in the power of faking it until you make it on some of these things. This is an example where I think it's appropriate.
Yeah, I think it's easier said than done, but I think it's pretty necessary. And I agree with what you about the selfish incentive to not be jealous. I'm all about selfish incentives because I think we're all pretty selfish in nature, and I think that's self-evident. Um, and I think that's a good thing to get people going. I don't know. What do you do in your psyche or in your life to deal with that? Like, are you tempted to just write people off, be like, oh, look, that person's like a professional athlete now, like fuck them, I don't want to like be associated with them, or that person's went to this school or got this job or did that thing, like what?
Yeah, I I will not pretend to be an angel. I mean, I definitely have jealous instincts, and I definitely, get jealous of other people. What I try to do in all cases is to really focus on the fact that their success is not at my expense, and that it really isn't true that somebody is succeeding prevents me from succeeding. It may be true in a very narrow microcosm of, if two people want the same job, there's only one job, one of them gets it. But why should that matter? Go find another one. Get better until next time. Like it's far too easy to let jealousy erode a sense of responsibility, and I think that is what makes it pernicious. When the jealousy eats away at your willingness to improve for next time or finding a better path forward. I heard a great quote the other day, and I wish I could remember where I saw it, but it was the idea of making yourself a monopoly of one. That, and again, back to the point that you made before, there'll only be one person of you. That is a monopoly. That is to your
Yep.
advantage. Monopolies are competitive advantages. Find a place where your monopoly is valued. And so, in that sense, jealousy is in a sense somewhat of a an illusion, because they really can't ever compete with you in your total
Hmm.
person. They can compete with aspects of you, but it is your job to find an aspect of yourself that is better than theirs. And so I really think the key is having an abundance focused mindset, and to focus as a society, if you will, on a society of growth and of creating new opportunity. That is really the only way to avoid the pernicious jealousy, is by avoiding zero sum situations. That is the purpose, or the, at least say should could be the purpose of a capitalistic or of an entrepreneurship focused society, is the idea that we are always looking to do new, to do better, to do bigger, to grow. There's a moral dimension to that, because that growth and improvement can improve people's lives. But there's also a psychological component to it. The idea that if you have avenues to channel competition in a way that leads to improvement, that is better than competition that leads to jealousy and resentment and excuse making.
Yeah, you also got to recognize that a lot of these people that you find yourself being jealous of, like, you're only seeing certain parts of them.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have a camera following them around the whole time, and you're not being jealous of their entire lives, their lives
Right.
in their entirety. You're
Right.
being jealous of whatever gets posted, whatever you see on their LinkedIn, whatever you see on their Instagram, whatever you see in X place.
Yeah.
And also, like, a lot of these high performers, I mean, like, the classic example is the astronauts that first went to the moon, right? Like, they were, I don't know, like the Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, those guys, like, they were like in their 30s, early 30s, and they were astronauts for NASA, first men on the moon. Like, where do you go from there? And after coming back down to Earth, literally and figuratively, they had a lot of issues. Like, Buzz Aldrin's, he fought depression and alcoholism and all this. Like, all those guys were just, they were in deep trouble. Like, they couldn't get back to that level, and it was very problemsome from them. And you see it in sports, you see it in entertainment, actors. Like, these people really aren't that happy, even though they have these hills up in, these houses up in the Hollywood Hills and whatnot. They're no happier than the poor people that you see around town.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely true in a lot of cases, and a good point too that you're only seeing a small part of it, and more to the point on social media, et cetera, that it's a very narrow window into the lives of these people. I guess I just want to make sure people take the point we're making properly and not misconstrue it. I'm not against competition. I'm not against people wanting to learn from other people. I'm against jealousy when it has the potential for violence, and when it has the potential for people to gang up on somebody else, or to try to take something from somebody else. And my fear really is that will be made more possible by people making money in any variety of volatile asset markets, where there's definitely a large role of luck involved with all of these things. That will become an excuse to be mad at people for having more money than you have or something. I would just say, don't do that. Don't take away their success. Don't take away their accomplishments. Don't take away their financial earnings or their financial standings. Be happy, celebrate with them, be happy that they're wealthy. And I think easier said than done, to be sure, but a behavior that can be learned nonetheless, and I think will make your life happier, and it will make you a better friend in the process.
Yeah, we also need to encourage the people that do find success from things like Doge or from Bitcoin to have a little bit of perspective on it. Like, just be like, oh yeah, I know everything about investing now because I just
Right.
luckily made all this money off Bitcoin, which is just pure speculation, totally unpredictable. Like, yeah, I know more than everyone else. Like, no, it's not the case. Like, you flipped a coin and you hit heads. You called heads and you hit it. Like, that's
Yeah.
it could have just as easily gone the other way. That doesn't make you an expert. That doesn't mean that you need to go and spike the football in front of all these people that actually do know what they're doing, or do understand risk in the
Yeah.
markets, etc.
I
And
agree.
I think that would reduce some of the violence. But
Yeah.
uh,
A really good point. And in
yeah,
fact, a point that I think goes hand in hand with the jealousy antidote is the idea of humility in victory, which is as timely a lesson as ever, and certainly a lesson now, especially when there are so many people that are without a job because of the lockdowns, et cetera. I mean, now is not the time to go out and flaunting, your 10 steps to success program or whatever the hell it may be. Humility definitely goes a long way, and is one of those timeless virtues that absolutely goes hand in hand with the idea of trying to prevent jealousy from becoming this pernicious violence generator.
all right. Just to change gears a little bit, I've been reading a book too this week that I think dovetails in with this in certain ways. The book is called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And I don't know if you've heard of Napoleon Hill. He's an author that predates. He's a businessman that predates Dale Carnegie, and he started writing like business books back then. And he writes about a lot of the same things as like Norman Vincent Peale would write about, or Tony Robbins, or people of that nature. And his whole thing is that you can, and I'll talk about this later after I finish the book. I'm only like you, I'm only partway through this, but I've also researched him heavily, pretty much on the internet too, outside of the book. But he's all about just the keys to success you were talking about is just laying it out. Like, you have to really zero in your focus on just one thing you want, and then you re-emphasize, reiterate that focus over and over in your mind. Like, he suggests writing it down a few times a day before bed and when you wake up, kind of similar to like the Scott Adams affirmations, which I think totally work. But he says that the universe will give you whatever wage you ask for it. Like, most people just don't ask for the wage that they want. They just think that it's out of their hands. But by just focusing in and getting your focus directed, like directly on one thing that you want, and be specific about it too, and just turning that focus into a habit, so that's always at the forefront of your mind, it literally changes how you look at the world and how you interact with the world. Not in like a supernatural way, but just in a way that things start to fall in place.
Yeah.
And I've seen this happen in my own life. I'll talk about that a little bit later in a future podcast, but it it it's unbelievable, like just the results that I've seen in my life, and starting to look at some of the super ultra successful people around me that also do the same thing. And it feels like the biggest kept secret. Now, I know there's that Netflix documentary, The Secret,
Right.
that, but that's kind of the same thing.
Right.
I hate how they produced it and
Sure.
put it out there, but
Yeah.
I mean, what if that's the answer to everything? What if you can get anything you want as long as you just focus in on it, habitualize your desire for it, and then just let the pieces fall in place?
Yeah, I think that the point you're making is the non supernatural aspect of it is, I think, the part to focus on. That it makes sense if you wake up every day and do things that work towards the goal that you are trying to work towards, then just by definition you will get closer to that end goal. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, it's finding out the number of steps that there are between where you are and where you want to be, and always making sure that you are taking a step towards that end goal. And I think, this ties in with Peter Thiel's idea of having an optimistic determinist worldview, which is the idea that the future can be better, and that it has a very particular way in which it can be better, and that we should not feel a need to hedge our bets with a bunch of different things, but should focus on a thing and work towards accomplishing it. And you hear that from other people as well, the idea of not trying to overly diversify, but actually being hyper focused on a thing.
Mhm.
And to me, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, how do you learn something in school? Do you read a chapter of it here and a chapter over there? No, you get your ass out and you focus on that subject. Like, that's how you learn it. You focus on it. And to me, it makes all the sense in the world. If you there's a saying I like from Tony Robbins, the idea of the science of success, the idea that you define a goal that you want to achieve and you break out systematically. Okay, how do I do that? How do I if my goal is to become a lawyer, how do I become a lawyer? Well, first you got to get a 4-year degree, then you have to go to law school, then you have to pass the bar, then you have to get hired. I mean, there are things you do, there are steps you do to get to that end goal. And if you're always focusing on that end goal, I think a lot of it could be like dieting or something. It's like, how do you diet? Well, you diet by eating healthy food. How do you eat healthy food? By having on your mindset all the time, eating healthy food. That's how you do it. You do a diet one day at a time, 1 hour at a time, one meal at a time. And if you're always focusing on that end goal, then you are going to be focusing on what you're trying to accomplish. It reminds me of the scene in a movie called The Savages, or maybe it's called Savages by Oliver Stone, where these two guys, their girlfriend gets kidnapped, and they're driving to go rescue her, and the guy says, "Look, it's very simple. Put one big idea in your head. This girl will not die." That's the big idea that
Yeah,
you
yeah.
have in your head. Like, that's what you do. Like, that's how you achieve something in life. You put one big idea in your head. Elon Musk says, "We're going to get our ass to Mars." That's a big idea in his head. The NASA astronauts, or rather the NASA engineers that just landed a rover on Mars. Hey, that's a big fucking deal. How do they do that? They put one big idea in their head. We're going to land a helicopter on Mars. That's what we're going to do. They put that idea in their head. Every day they work towards it. And lo and behold, however many years after the fact, that is what they did. The science of success. Those engineers knew, okay, this is Mars. This is the Martian orbit. This is what the atmosphere of Mars is like. This is what we're going to land on. This is what materials we need to build the thing line up to get up into space. Okay. Science of success, defining an objective, breaking out how to achieve it, and making every step you take work towards that goal. I think it makes a lot of sense.
And you mentioned Elon Musk. I wouldn't be surprised if he does this, if he does the affirmations, if he writes things down every day, because that's the surefire way to program it into your. It's called the reticular activation, where your awareness is. And like you use the diet example, and I think that the mechanism of how that manifests is like, let's say you every day you write down like, I will lose X many pounds, or I will eat healthy, or I will become whatever. That person then, as they're just mindlessly scrolling through Twitter that day or through Instagram or whatever, like they start all of a sudden the ads about dieting start catching their eye, or the posts from the fitness people start catching their eye in a way that they wouldn't. There's this phenomenon in psychology. It's called I'm going to butcher the name. It's like the Bernie Madoff phenomenon or something. It's like whenever you first learn of a new topic, like you start seeing it everywhere. Like, let's say you learn of the word, I don't know, like you learn of a new flower, like a new type of flower,
right?
Like the bougainvillea plant or something. And then before that, you're completely aware of it. You learn of it once, and then for the next few weeks, you're like, holy shit, I'm seeing bougainvilleas everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's like, where did they come from? It's like, no, they're always there. It's just your awareness has changed.
Yeah.
So you just have that programmed in you. Flipping through Twitter, you see the diet things, like you're going through the menu and you're like, oh wait, what's this number next to the Big Mac, this 1330 number? Oh, it's the calories. Okay, now I know that food has calories. I need to count calories. And it just the universe pushes, once you program it in your mind, the universe just starts pushing you in that direction until you get your goals. So it's not a function. Achieving your goals isn't a function of how intelligent you are or how capable you are. It's where's your awareness.
Right. Well, it's what are you focusing your mind on? I mean, the human mind, the human brain, I'm sure there are limits to it, but just like a cursory example of things that almost every human being can do. Learning language. Okay, well, language is this, almost infinite phenomena that is incredibly powerful. If you could learn a language, you can probably do a lot. Thinking abstractly, thinking reason and logic, like these are incredibly powerful tools that whatever your IQ is, you probably have access to all of these things. And the idea of focusing your life on a narrow objective is what it convinces you that is in fact possible. I mean, you and I have used the example before of the idea of like lifting weights. Like, why do you lift weights? It's to be stronger, to be healthy. All that is good. But another reason psychologically why it's good, and you hear coaches talk about this, but it convinces you that who you are today does not have to be who you are tomorrow. That if you lift weights, you will become stronger. You will change something about who you are. You did that. You have now proven to yourself that change is possible. It is a positive example of change in your life that you did through hard work. And if it applies to lifting weights, it can apply to other things as well. Learning a topic, learning how to speak in public, whatever the activity is, whatever the talent stack is, whatever it is. If you are methodical and if you are intelligent about laying out a roadmap and then holding yourself accountable to that roadmap, you will achieve success. That is the bottom line. And that ability to take a problem and to break it down into small steps is available to anybody. I mean, how could it not be? I mean, that anybody who accomplishes anything is doing that anyways. It's making that become a habit so you do it all the time.
I think there's other benefits of it besides everything we mentioned. Just having a goal focused in your life, like something to work towards in your life, is something that most people don't have. Like if you approach any average American today and said like, hey, what's your one goal in life? Like what are you going for? They would probably have to think about it. They would go back and forth. They would probably list off like 3 or 4 different scattered answers. Like, oh, I want to be happy. I want to have a family. I want to take care of like this person and that. But I think that's one of the biggest causes for all the anxiety and depression in our country is that these people don't have any goals. They don't have any like objectives in the game. It's like they're playing the game, but they have nothing that they're
Yeah.
working towards, nothing that they're moving towards. They're just kind of wandering, floating around wherever the wind blows them. And I think that causes a lot of anxiety, especially in younger people that like don't know where their futures are. These are like important things that people need to focus on that they don't.
I totally agree, and I think that uh, and to Jack's credit on the podcast 2 weeks ago, and then to the credit of people like Peter Thiel, who focus on worldview. I mean, worldview is everything. It's everything. And if you don't believe that you control at least some part of your life, why would you make any effort at all? I mean, what would the point be? If it's all just a mirage, what would be the point? So I am an optimist. I believe that the future can be better, and I believe that we as a species have it within our capacity to make direct changes to make that future better. And I would implore anybody listening to adopt a similar worldview, that believe in the future, believe it can be better, and believe in our capacity as a human species to do those things that make it better. I would implore you to adopt that worldview.
Yeah, and then I think that's a very positive message for everyone to listen to, and probably a good place for us to start wrapping this up. You want to plug the album and all the Instagram and everything?
Yes, and we'll put links and everything in our description below. Check out that album by Outkast. I will be listening to it myself. I'm a big fan of Outkast, and I will make this album one to listen to. Joe, the album name one more time for the audience.
Southernplayalisticadillacmuzik.
Southernplayalisticadillacmuzik. Definitely an album
Yep.
to revisit. And like I said, we'll be putting all that in our tweets and everything else going out to plug it as well. Give it a listen. Then follow us again on our website, www.rosesandrhetoric.com. We're on Twitter at roses_rhetoric. And then follow Joe as well at Jose4_Cuervo. And it's the same name for the Instagram as well. But until next time, I'm Jimmy Hackett signing off for Joseph Stanford, saying ciao.